This is a story about what happened to me and my husband about 3 years ago. We had two small children, a boy and a girl. Our son died of a bad illness. Soon after is when this story began. We had just returned from retrieving our son's ashes, which we kept in an urn atop our bedroom dresser. Earlier that evening, we had just put our infant daughter to bed and were lying in bed watching TV. Our son's urn slowly started moving from the back of the dresser to the front, then started shaking from side to side as if he wanted out. I was very scared, as this was my first experience with actually seeing a spirit. I hid my head under the covers and told my husband to move his urn to the back of the dresser so it wouldn't fall off. I didn't think I could actually stand to have to see his ashes. My husband got up and spoke to our son. He was much braver than I was at the time, telling him it was okay and he needed to be careful not to fall off the dresser. My husband had just returned to bed when it started again. This time, he removed our son's urn and placed it on the floor. That's what started it all. For then, we heard a loud crash come from the bathroom. My husband went to investigate. Returning to me, he had found nothing broken or moved. Then the noises moved to the kitchen and then to his bedroom, as if he was still going about his play. We then realized that our son must not know that he had passed on. My husband tried speaking to him and telling him it was okay and he should go on to heaven. The noises stopped. We thought he listened to him. But then there was a knocking at the door. It was our best friend and was also our son's godmother. We sat on the living room couch and told her what had just happened. She in turn told us what we had assumed. He was too young to realize he was gone. From our friend's vantage point on the couch, she could see partially into the bathroom. We heard her gasp and then cry out. "My God," she said, "look at that." We all went into the bathroom to discover what made the loud crash that came from the bathroom earlier. There was a small handprint on the cabinet under the sink. It was just the size of our recently departed son's and looked as though he had been playing in the dirt, for it was brownish, black in color. I know that it was not there earlier, for I, my husband, and our friend had spent the few days cleaning the house, removing all his clothes and toys, giving them to our friend. That was the end of it for the night, but it started again the very next morning. I must tell this about our son first so you will understand what happened. Our son slept in the room on the other side of our bedroom wall. When he awoke every morning, he would play for a little, walk quietly. Then he started to get hungry. He would knock on the adjoining wall. This would wake me up. The very next morning, I was awakened by the knocking on the wall and have just woken up. I was still disoriented, got out of bed to go and tend to my son, not remembering that he was gone until opening his bedroom door to find it empty. I was not so scared this time, and I spoke to him. I told him that we loved and missed him, but that as he passed on, I could not give him his breakfast. I went back in my bedroom and woke my husband to tell him what had happened. Later that morning, I received a frantic call from our friend, telling me of the very real dream she had the night before, after leaving our house. Her youngest son was only 2 months old at the time, and still woke in the middle of the night for a bottle. So when she awoke to her son's cries, she just got up and went to the kitchen to heat him a bottle. She was turning the lights on as she went. As she turned the kitchen light on, there was her son standing in the middle of her kitchen. She was shocked at first, but then started to speak to him. Our son and friend were very close before he died, and went to her house frequently to play with her 3 children. She was a strong believer in the supernatural. It didn't bother her at first. A game that they used to play was my son would run around her house with a beach ball, and she would chase after him. In this dream, he had the ball and was calling to her to chase him. She went after him, calling his name. After a few minutes of chasing him, he ran into her youngest son's room and disappeared. That's when she woke up to, you may have guessed it, her son's nightly feeding. So she was very frightened, then thinking she had dreamed what was about to happen. It didn't though. It was our son's best way of telling his best friend goodbye. All that day, we heard noises, much the same as the night before, only his spirit was no longer in his urine, so it didn't move anymore. But the strangest of all was to happen to me that night while I slept. My husband and I were babysitting our friend's 3 children at her house, while she and her husband were out at a restaurant. We were in the living room with our daughter and her 2 older children playing video games. Her youngest son was taking a nap. A few minutes later, he awoke from his nap and started to cry for a bottle. So I went into his bedroom, and there, in his doorway, was my son, the exact spot that he had disappeared from in my friend's dream. I yelled for my husband to come to me. Just as my husband was coming down the hall, our son ran out of the bedroom and down the other end of the hall. When we started to walk towards him, he showed us he had the beach ball in his hands. Then he spoke, "Mama, Daddy, want to play ball?" So we all sat down in the hallway and rolled the ball back and forth. After a few minutes, he got up and went out into the living room to watch the other kids play video games. That is where my dream ended. Later in the morning, I called my friend to tell her about my dream. It was like she had the first half of the dream and I had the second. Nothing like that had ever happened to either of us before, or again. Over the next couple days, the noises continued. My husband and I felt very bad, not able to really get over our son's death because he was still with us, which was a good thing, and a bad, I guess. Our son had a little bit more time with us, but we knew we had to help him move on. We just didn't know how. Later that night, after my husband had left for work, I was home alone with our daughter. I'd just put her down to sleep. I was sitting on my bed, watching TV, when I heard a noise coming from the living room. I looked out my bedroom door and out into my kitchen. It was a very connected apartment. I saw a man standing in my kitchen. I was very scared at this because it was not my son and I had no idea who it was. Then, just as quickly, he disappeared. Then, I saw my son run by the bedroom door. I got a very cold feeling of dread. I just felt such anger coming from the kitchen and fear for my son. It looked as if my son was running from the man. That made me mad. Who was this man to scare my son, even in death? I knew that right then and there that I must do something. I called my husband and friend, and they both came to me. My friend said that we should get a Ouija board and try to contact this man and find out what his problem was with our son. So, she left, and my husband and I went to buy one. We came home and went into our son's bedroom and sat on the floor. It wasn't that long before the man came through. He explained to us that he had been cremated right before our son, and some of his ashes had been left behind, and now were in the same urn as our son. He wanted the rest of his ashes. We told him that there was nothing we could do about it, but that we would help him and our son move on, so they could be at peace. The man explained to us that since he was trapped with some of his spirit in our house, and the rest of it elsewhere, that I would have to guide him through the Ouija board. So I did, and our son followed. That was the end of the man. But our son still comes to visit us occasionally. We feel him with us always. Losing a loved one, especially a child, is very difficult. But by our son hanging around for a while, it did help us by getting to say goodbye one last time. My mom thinks she has a ghost in her bedroom. Either her father, mother, or grandmother she feels. Her television goes on and off by itself at all hours, day or night, even when she is not in there. We will all be in the living room and hear something all of a sudden. One or two of us will go check the noise, and it's the television. It's been turned on, and the volume has been turned up loud enough to hear in the living room. She, my mom, double checks before she leaves the room to make sure the TV is off. The TV also gets turned off when she is in her room watching it, or turned off when she is in there asleep. All of us get the feeling someone is watching us sometimes. It's never a threatening feeling. It's just like someone familiar is with us. I've had a few dreams of events that have taken place within a week of the dreams also. Things like, I dreamt I was standing in our backyard and you can see our neighbor's front yard from there. In the dream, there were about a dozen cars parked in front of their house, and people going into the house were dressed in like Sunday clothes. I went back in our house and told my mom that old lady Rogers must have died there because there were a lot of people over there. When I woke up that morning, I looked at the obituaries and there was Miss Rogers' name. I never even knew she was ill, and we all thought her husband would go first. Then, there was the dream about an airplane crashing into my aunt's truck with a parking lot full of cars, and hers was the only one that was touched. I woke up when the plane hit the truck. It was about 1:45 p.m. My mom got a call from my aunt that night. She said she had been in a wreck just before 2 p.m. that day. Weird, huh? Just wanted to share. I am from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I am giving you information about my grandmother's house at Sunset Road. This house is directly across from a street from an old cemetery. I grew up in this house and have seen many scary things. I was about 11 years old, and I saw a man's figure appear on the side of my grandmother's bed. A very large man, and keep in mind that it seemed to look like my grandfather, who I never met. My grandmother was blind and saw him. I've heard footsteps in this house when I was the only one there. My sister saw my dead grandfather walking down the basement steps the day of his funeral. A couple of people have died in this house, and that is why I'm not surprised at all that it is haunted. Thanks for listening to my short story, and I hope you appreciated it. Okay, so here goes my story. I know it sounds really impossible to some, but either bear with me or quit reading. About 2 to 3 years ago, I lived in a very old apartment complex in Maryville, Ohio. When we first moved in there, I knew there was something very weird about it. It just didn't seem like a very happy place. My parents were in the process of a divorce, and my dad lived within walking distance. I chose the room on the left. Once you walked up the stairs, there was a staircase with a landing halfway up the stairs that you could see from my doorway. My mom's room was right on the other side of mine, and the bathroom right across the hall. Well, back to the story. So I was being babysat by my best friend's sister, and we were downstairs listening to music, and suddenly, all the lights and music went off. We figured the power had just gone out, so we just started talking. After about 10 minutes, the TV came on, and it was all static. Lately, I had been seeing a man in a black cloak run from our kitchen out the back door, and I looked over, and I saw it again. Nobody in my family believed me, so I looked at Constance and asked her if she had seen that, and she said yes. So we were a bit freaked out and decided to go upstairs. At about 3 in the morning, Constance went back to sleep, and I stayed up because I could have sworn I was hearing people downstairs and that the stairs were creaking. I turned to switch the stereo on. The power had come back by this time, and I heard a voice right behind me. It was a guy's voice, and it said, "Don't scream and don't be afraid." I slowly turned around, expecting to see a guy with a rope or something, ready to tie me up, but there was nobody there. I quietly asked who was there and where they were, but nobody answered. Constance was babysitting for a week. I decided I had imagined it, so I just decided to go to bed. The next night, we were watching a cartoon in my bedroom, and I heard the same voice. I turned the TV off and asked Constance if she had heard that, and she said she heard a man talking. So I asked who was there, and they were there again. This time it answered me. It said its name was Willie, and that he wanted to be friends. He said he was sitting right beside me. I turned to look, and I couldn't see him. Will said that he was my guardian angel, so I wouldn't be able to see him. I think it was a mistake. I agreed to be a friend, so me and Constance talked to him for the remainder of the babysitting stay. After about a month, things started to turn for the worst. I had a problem with one of my friends, and I told Willie, and he, or it, asked me if I wanted him to hurt him. And that was when I decided he wasn't very friendly and asked him to leave. That night, I had my friend that had made me angry. We made up. Spend the night as a way to say I forgive you. Well, I thought something might happen, but I took my mind off of it. At about midnight, we decided to turn the TV off and just talk until we fell asleep. I heard something on the stairs and went to look, but I couldn't see anyone, but I thought I heard my name and Willie's voice, so I went back to my room and shut my door. Right after I shut my door, I heard someone laughing, and this freaked both of us out because my mom was at the neighbor's house. I ran over and locked my door, then ran back to my bed and grabbed my baseball bat and stood by my closet ready to hit anyone who came in. Then, my doorknob started shaking and my door rattled violently. I seriously thought I heard Willie's distinct laugh, so I hollered at him and told him to go away and never come back. Right after that, the door stopped, and we both vowed to never tell anyone who knew what happened. Of course, if we seriously considered it first, then we might tell someone. But seriously, are we nuts? Am I nuts? Thanks for reading. I wanted to tell you some of my personal experiences that happened in Randallstown, Maryland. There's a Job Corps Center on Old Court Road. It is technically considered Woodstock, Maryland. The center is called Woodstock Corps Job Center. I was a student, as well as a residential advisor, at this facility from 1995 to 1996 as a student. In 1998 to 1999, residential advisor. Anyway, this is a huge mansion-type building that currently houses up to 550 students. It used to be a monk monastery. There is a graveyard for the monks that still sits at the entrance of the center. Well, when I was a student there were a lot of strange things that would happen, but we had one that was widely known around the center. He was called the Black Monk, not because of the color of his skin, but because he had no face, and under the hood of his cloak, you could see only black. He used to walk around the center at night. If you woke up in the middle of the night and looked out your window, you would sometimes see him on the grounds. The next experience is that there is a dorm called Columbia. All the dorms are named after surrounding towns. That was the dorm that I lived in. There used to be an extension to the dorm that you could access through a door at the back of the lounge. The entrance to that part was always kept locked on the upstairs section of the dorm. This section of Columbia burned down sometime in the 80s. When the dorm caught fire, there was a 16-year-old girl who perished in the fire. She has been seen many times in the dorm lounge. Just before I started at the center, there was a dance. This could have happened in the summer of 1995. The night of the dance, a young girl, I believe she was 16 or 17, was out on the grounds, walking to the dance. When she realized that the dance was starting, she began to run to the entrance to get to the dance. As she trotted towards the entrance, she realized that she was having trouble breathing. She was an asthmatic and had forgotten her inhaler in her room. Having trouble breathing and with no one around, everyone was in the dance. She sat down on the steps to the then flagpole, now waterfall, and unfortunately perished. She was also a resident of Columbia Hall, and you could hear her wheezing walking down the hall at times during the night or when the dorm was quiet. Now, when I was a staff member there, I was placed in Columbia Hall as staff. Well, in the mornings, we used to have a check of all the rooms to make sure that the girls had cleaned their rooms, closed, and locked the lounge and laundry room, etc. One morning, while I was up there, I would always start at the far end of the dorm, checking rooms, and the laundry room was about midway down the hall, and the lounge was at the end of the hall. Anyway, I went in to check a student's room, and when I came back out of that room, I realized that the lounge room door was locked. It was open when I went into the first room and closed when I came out, so I decided to go down and just lock it, figuring the door had just caught wind. When I went to lock it, it was already locked. This was impossible, since the door had to be locked with a key. Then, just at that moment, I heard the washing machines, all four of them, start up in spin mode. So, at this point, I got creeped out, and I went into the laundry room to investigate, thinking maybe one of the girls was being funny. When I got into the laundry room, there was no one in sight, and as I lifted the lids, all of the washers were half full with water. Mind you, I said that they were in spin mode. At this point, I became too creeped out to stand in, so I ran downstairs to get another staff member to come up with me until my inspection was complete. I don't know if I had some kind of gift or something, but I was not the only one to see or hear things, except that morning, no one else was with me. But there was something about that place that just seemed to draw this one out in me. I was always the one to see them and draw other people's attention to them. Since leaving there, I've not had such powerful occasions. I've had some strange things happen, feeling someone else in the room is with me, etc., but nothing this strong, and I will never forget them. Thanks for listening. Is there anyone out there to comment, like, share, and subscribe? Should we have thumb wars to decide which narration is the best narration that I've ever done on this channel? Cast your vote to find out instantly. Just kidding, there is no casting your vote. To be honest, why would you fight if you wanted to do that kind of stuff either? I don't want to fight. I don't want to make people fight on my channel. Thumb wars are not really that violent, but you never know. I mean, they could put an eye out with someone's face. I don't know. Anyway, guys, yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. Thank you again so much for tuning in and, listening to this narration as always. I'm always grateful for your support. I'm always grateful that, I don't make any sense just so I can entertain you guys a little bit in the outro and just so you guys understand that I'm here to stay for a while. A long time at least. Anyway, I'm starting to make little sense again. Seriously, guys, there were some great stories in here. I really like the monk story, the dorm story and the monk story. I've been reading a lot of school-related stories, and it's by accident. I'm just coming across these stories, and I'm like, oh my god, like, this is amazing. But if you guys want to let me know how you feel about these stories in particular in the comments section, go ahead. Or if you just want to say hello and say hi, I'm always here to, let you know that I will respond and care about what you say. So go ahead and hit me up if you want in the comment section below. And with that, that's all I really have to say, guys. Good night, good morning. It's almost summertime, isn't it? So I'll see you. Well, I won't see you in the summer. I'll see you in the next upload, which will probably be Monday or Tuesday. But you know me with my delays and such. Anyway, guys, good night, good morning. I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.